Salvatore Moretti was the most feared mafia boss in Chicago. No one dared lie to him. No one dared hide anything from him. But for 2 years, one woman had been keeping a secret from him, and he never knew. Until the day she collapsed on his kitchen floor, and the doctor asked him a question that froze the blood in his veins. Is this woman living on the streets? He followed her home in secret, and what he saw beneath the highway overpass in the dead of a Chicago winter changed him forever. 3 children, a styrofoam box for a crib, a worn-out coat for a blanket, and a 7-year-old girl standing barefoot in the freezing cold, shielding her mother, staring straight into the eyes of a mafia boss without a trace of fear. But what truly shattered him was when the oldest daughter stepped forward, looked straight into his eyes, and revealed the truth that no one had dared to tell him for the past 3 months. 3 weeks before Elena collapsed, Salvatore Moretti sat in his office on the 2nd floor of the Lincoln Park mansion, reviewing documents that required his signature. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the mahogany desk where empires had been built and enemies had been destroyed. But his eyes kept drifting downward, through the glass wall that overlooked the living room below. Elena was feeding Bella breakfast, the same scene he had witnessed hundreds of times over the past 2 years. His 4-year-old daughter sat at the kitchen table, swinging her legs that did not yet reach the floor, while Elena spooned oatmeal into her mouth with the patience of a saint. It should have been ordinary. It should have been invisible, the way the help always was to men like him. But something made Salvatore pause. Something made him set down his pen and really look at the woman who had been caring for his daughter since his wife died. Elena's hands trembled as she held the spoon, not the subtle tremor of cold or age, but the shake of someone whose body was failing them. And when the light caught her fingers at just the right angle, Salvatore saw it. The skin cracked open at the knuckles, raw and red, with thin lines of dried blood filling the crevices like rivers on a map. He leaned closer to the glass. When had she become so thin? The uniform that had fit her perfectly 2 years ago now hung from her shoulders like cloth draped over a wire hanger. Her collarbones jutted out sharply beneath the fabric, and her cheekbones cast hollows in her face that had not been there before. The dark circles under her eyes looked less like exhaustion and more like bruises that had never healed. And that coat, that old, worn coat she wore every single day, wrapped around her body like armor. The heaters in the mansion ran constantly during Chicago winters. The rooms were warm enough to walk around in short sleeves, yet Elena never removed that coat, not when she cooked, not when she cleaned, not when she bathed Bella and put her to bed. Salvatore realized, with a discomfort he did not want to examine, that he had never asked her why. He had never asked her anything. 2 years, 730 days of this woman raising his daughter, feeding her, clothing her, singing her to sleep when the nightmares came. And Salvatore did not know where Elena lived. He did not know if she had family. He did not know anything about her beyond the name on her employment papers and the fact that she showed up at 6 every morning and left at 7 every night. He was Salvatore Moretti. He gave orders. He did not ask questions about the help. Below, Bella suddenly reached out and grabbed Elena's hand. "Elena, what happened to your hand? It's bleeding." The little girl's voice carried up through the ventilation system, clear as a bell. Elena pulled her hand back quickly, hiding it behind her body. She smiled at Bella, that gentle smile she always wore, and said, "It's nothing, sweetheart. Just dry skin from the cold weather." Salvatore watched Elena's face as she spoke. He watched her lips curve upward, and her cheeks lift in all the right places. A perfect smile, a practiced smile, a smile that never reached her eyes. He turned back to his desk, forcing his attention to the contracts waiting for his signature. The Moretti Empire did not run itself. He had shipments to approve, territories to manage, problems to solve. The image of Elena's bleeding hands flickered through his mind. He pushed it away. It was just the winter. Chicago winters were brutal. Dry air cracked everyone's skin. There was nothing to worry about. He picked up his pen and signed his name. He was wrong. 3 weeks passed, and Salvatore convinced himself that everything was fine. Elena continued to arrive at 6 in the morning and leave at 7 at night. She continued to feed Bella, bathe Bella, read stories to Bella until the little girl fell asleep. She continued to wear that old coat and hide her cracked hands and smile that smile that never quite reached her eyes. And Salvatore continued to look away, until Thursday morning, at 9:47, when the universe decided he could not look away anymore. Elena stood at the kitchen counter, warming milk for Bella's morning bottle, a simple task she had performed thousands of times, her hands wrapped around the small pot, stirring slowly, mechanically, the way she always did. But her other hand gripped the edge of the counter with a force that turned her knuckles white. Her legs were not steady, They trembled beneath her, barely perceptible, like a table with one leg shorter than the others. She blinked rapidly, again and again, as if trying to clear a fog that kept rolling back in. The pot tilted. The milk spilled across the stovetop, white liquid spreading like a slow flood. Elena did not react. Her eyes were open, but they saw nothing. The pot slipped from her fingers and clattered against the burner. Then her knees buckled. Then her body followed. She fell the way a puppet falls when you cut all the strings at once. No hands reaching out to break the impact. No reflexive twist to protect the head. Just straight down, a complete and total collapse. Her body hitting the marble floor with a sound that echoed through the entire first floor of the mansion. A dry, hollow sound. The sound of something breaking that should not break. Salvatore heard it from his office upstairs. His pen stopped mid-signature, his head lifted, and before his mind could process what the sound might be, his body was already moving. He took the stairs 3 at a time, his heart pounding against his ribs like a fist trying to punch through a wall. He rounded the corner into the kitchen and stopped dead. Elena lay motionless on the floor. The spilled milk pooled around her head like a white halo, soaking into her hair, spreading across the marble in all directions. Her eyes were closed. Her face was gray, the color of ash, the color of concrete, the color of death creeping in at the edges. Salvatore dropped to his knees beside her. His fingers found her wrist, pressing against the thin skin where the pulse should be strong and steady. It was there, but barely. A flutter, a whisper, the heartbeat of someone whose body had given up long before the mind agreed to stop. He slid his arms beneath her and lifted, and froze. She weighed nothing, not like a grown woman should weigh, not like a person made of muscle and bone and life. She weighed what his daughter weighed, maybe less. She weighed what a skeleton wrapped in paper might weigh. Through the thin fabric of her uniform, he could feel every single rib. They pressed against his forearms like the keys of a piano, each one distinct, each one countable. How long had she been starving? How long had her body been consuming itself while he sat in his office signing contracts? He carried her to the living room, laying her down on the leather sofa with a gentleness he did not know he possessed. Her head rolled to the side, limp, unconscious. A strand of milk-soaked hair clung to her cheek. Salvatore pulled out his phone and dialed the only number that mattered. Dr. Webb, my house. Now. Emergency. He ended the call without waiting for a response. Then he stood over Elena's unconscious body, looking down at the woman who had cared for his daughter for 2 years. And for the first time in his life, Salvatore Moretti, the man who had stared down the barrel of a gun without flinching, felt a fear he could not name. Dr. Marcus Webb arrived 45 minutes later, carrying the same black leather medical bag he had carried for the Moretti family for over 15 years. He had treated gunshot wounds at 3 a.m. He had stitched knife cuts without asking questions. He had pronounced death on men whose names would never appear in any official record. But when he knelt beside Elena on the living room sofa, his face changed in a way Salvatore had never seen before. The doctor worked in silence, his movements methodical and precise. He checked her pulse first, counting the beats against his watch, his lips pressing thinner with each passing second. Then the blood pressure cuff, wrapped around an arm so thin that the standard size had to be adjusted twice before it would stay in place. He shone a penlight into her eyes, pulling back each eyelid with his thumb. The conjunctiva, the inner lining that should have been pink with healthy blood flow, was pale, almost white. The color of paper, the color of someone whose body had stopped making enough blood to keep itself alive. Doctor. Webb lifted Elena's hand, examining the cracked skin, the splits that ran deep into the flesh. He turned her fingers over, studying the tips. They were purple, not from cold, but from damage, old damage, the kind that comes from repeated exposure to freezing temperatures without protection. Then he pressed his fingers against her ribcage, counting 1, 2, 3, 4, each bone distinct beneath the skin, each bone visible through the thin fabric of her uniform. His jaw tightened. He stood, removing his stethoscope, and gestured for Salvatore to follow him into the hallway. Once they were out of the living room, he pulled the door closed behind them and turned to face the mafia boss with an expression that held no deference, no fear, only the grim authority of a man who dealt in facts. Severe malnutrition, doctor, Webb said, his voice low. Stage 3. Her body is consuming itself. The muscle tissue, the fat reserves, everything. It has been doing this for months. Salvatore opened his mouth to speak, but the doctor continued. Chronic hypothermia. Her core temperature is 2 degrees below normal, and those fingers show signs of old frostbite. Repeated frostbite. This did not happen once. This happened again and again. Over a long period of time, the doctor paused, letting the words settle. Severe vitamin D deficiency, the kind you see in people who have not been exposed to adequate shelter or warmth for extended periods. He looked directly into Salvatore's eyes. I am going to ask you a question, and I need you to answer me honestly. His voice dropped even lower, barely above a whisper. Is this woman living on the streets? The question hit Salvatore like a punch to the chest. That is impossible, he said immediately. I pay her $2,500 a month. That is enough to rent a decent apartment anywhere in Chicago. Dr. Webb studied him for a long moment. His eyes searched Salvatore's face, looking for something, perhaps a lie, perhaps guilt, perhaps just understanding. Whatever he was looking for, he did not seem to find it. He reached into his bag and pulled out a prescription pad, scribbling quickly. Vitamins, iron supplements, high-calorie nutritional shakes. She needs to eat, Mr. Moretti, real food, frequently, or the next time she collapses, she will not wake up. He handed over the prescription, picked up his bag, and walked toward the front door without another word. Salvatore stood alone in the hallway, the paper trembling slightly in his hand. Through the gap in the door, he could see Elena still lying on the sofa, unconscious, her chest barely rising and falling with each shallow breath. The woman who had raised his daughter for 2 years, the woman whose hands bled every day, the woman who never took off her coat. The doctor's question echoed in his skull, bouncing off the walls of his mind like a bullet in a closed room. Is this woman living on the streets? Salvatore wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it. He paid her well. He paid her more than most housekeepers in Chicago earned. There was no possible way she could be homeless. But the laugh would not come, because standing there in the cold silence of the hallway, Salvatore Moretti realized something that made his stomach turn. In 2 years, he had never once asked Elena where she lived. Not once. 2 days later, Elena returned to work as if nothing had happened. She arrived at 6 in the morning, the same as always. She wore the same old coat, buttoned up to her throat. She smiled the same hollow smile. She moved through the mansion with the same quiet efficiency, preparing Bella's breakfast, laying out Bella's clothes, brushing Bella's hair with the tenderness of a mother. No one mentioned the collapse. No one mentioned the doctor. No one mentioned the prescription for vitamins and iron supplements that Salvatore had filled himself and left on the kitchen counter. Elena took the bottles without a word. Whether she actually used them, Salvatore could not tell, but he watched her now. He watched her in a way he had never watched anyone who worked for him. He noticed how she cradled her hands against her body when she thought no one was looking. He noticed how she flinched when her cracked skin brushed against anything rough. He noticed how she avoided his eyes whenever he entered a room, always finding somewhere else to look, something else to do, some excuse to turn away. She was hiding something. He was certain of it now. The question was what? Saturday came, gray and bitter cold, the kind of Chicago winter day that made even the toughest men stay indoors. Elena's shift ended at 3 in the afternoon, earlier than usual, because Salvatore had insisted she take reduced hours until she recovered. She did not argue. She never argued. At 2:55, Elena disappeared into the small room off the kitchen, where the staff kept their personal belongings. At 3:02, she emerged wearing the same clothes she always wore beneath her uniform, a thin gray sweater, faded black pants, and that old coat wrapped around her like a second skin. In her hand, she carried a plastic bag. The bag bulged slightly, filled with something Salvatore could not identify from his position at the second-floor window. He watched her walk out the back door, cross the garden, and exit through the service gate. She did not look back. She walked down the tree-lined street toward the bus stop on the corner of Armitage Avenue, her shoulders hunched against the wind. No hat, no gloves, no scarf, just that coat and the plastic bag swinging against her leg with every step. The decision formed in Salvatore's mind before he consciously made it. Today, he would know the truth. He moved quickly down the stairs, grabbing his keys from the hook by the garage door. His brother Dante stood in the hallway, reviewing something on his phone, and looked up when Salvatore passed. "I need to go out for a while," Salvatore said. "Watch Bella for me." Dante's eyebrows rose. "Everything okay?" Salvatore did not answer. He was already through the garage door, sliding into the driver's seat of the black SUV, starting the engine before the door had fully closed behind him. He pulled out of the driveway and turned left onto the main road. Ahead, he could see Elena standing at the bus stop, her small figure dark against the gray sky. A bus approached from the opposite direction, its brakes hissing as it slowed to a stop. Elena climbed aboard. Salvatore followed, keeping 3 cars between his SUV and the bus, hanging back far enough to avoid notice. The bus pulled away from the curb, heading south on Clark Street. South, away from the brownstones and boutiques of Lincoln Park, away from the world Salvatore knew. He followed, and with every block the bus traveled, the city outside his window began to change. The elegant facades gave way to worn brick, the manicured lawns gave way to cracked concrete. The expensive cars parked along the curbs gave way to rusted sedans and empty lots filled with debris. The bus turned onto Halsted Street, heading deeper into neighborhoods that appeared on Salvatore's reports only when something went wrong. Drug territories, gang boundaries, places where even his own men did not go without backup, places where no one lived if they had any other choice. Salvatore gripped the steering wheel tighter and kept driving. The bus stopped in Pilsen, and Elena stepped off onto a cracked sidewalk littered with cigarette butts and broken glass. Salvatore pulled the SUV to the curb 50 meters back, killing the engine but keeping his eyes locked on her small figure. She stood at the bus stop, arms wrapped around herself, waiting. The plastic bag hung from her wrist, swaying slightly in the bitter wind. Around her, the neighborhood told its own story. Row houses with peeling paint and boarded windows, walls covered in layers of graffiti, some artistic, most just territorial markings. A grocery cart overturned in the gutter. A group of young men huddled on a corner, passing something between their hands. This was not Lincoln Park. This was not anywhere close. A second bus arrived, belching exhaust into the gray afternoon air. Elena climbed aboard without looking back. Salvatore followed. The bus wound deeper into the south side, past Bridgeport, past Canaryville, into back of the yards, a neighborhood whose name alone carried weight in Chicago's criminal underworld. Salvatore knew these streets, but only from reports. Drug arrests, gang shootings, bodies found in alleys. His organization had written off this territory years ago as more trouble than it was worth. No one came here unless they had no other choice. Elena got off at the corner of 47th Street and Halsted. She did not pause to look around. She did not check her phone or consult a map. She simply started walking, head down, shoulders hunched, the plastic bag bumping against her leg with every step. She knew exactly where she was going. Salvatore parked the SUV in front of an abandoned storefront, its windows covered with sheets of plywood. He sat for a moment, weighing his options. His car was too conspicuous here. A black SUV with tinted windows screamed money, power, danger. If Elena looked back, she would see him immediately. He had to follow on foot. Salvatore pulled the hood of his jacket up over his head, covering as much of his face as possible. The most feared mafia boss in Chicago could not afford to be recognized in enemy territory. One wrong look, one moment of hesitation, and the situation could turn deadly. He stepped out of the car and walked. Elena moved quickly through the failing light, past a vacant lot filled with rubble and weeds, past a chain-link fence topped with rusted barbed wire, past a narrow alley where shadows moved in ways that suggested human presence. She did not slow down. She did not speak to anyone. She walked like someone who had made this journey 100 times before, someone who knew every crack in the pavement, every danger to avoid. She turned a corner, and Salvatore followed at a distance, keeping close to the buildings, staying in the shadows. Then she stopped. In front of her loomed the concrete overpass of Interstate 90, a massive structure that cast a permanent shadow over the ground below. The roar of traffic above filled the air with a constant, low rumble. Trash collected along the base of the support columns. The smell of exhaust and decay hung thick in the cold air. Elena looked around, her head turning left, then right, scanning for anyone who might be watching. Salvatore pressed himself against a concrete pillar, holding his breath. Satisfied that she was alone, Elena ducked beneath the overpass and disappeared into the darkness underneath. Salvatore waited 10 seconds, 20. His heart pounded against his ribs so hard he could hear the blood rushing in his ears. He was a man who had seen things that would break most people. He had watched men die. He had made men die. He had walked through horrors without flinching. But standing there in the shadow of that overpass, about to follow a woman he barely knew into the unknown, Salvatore Moretti felt something he had not felt in a very long time. Fear. Not fear of danger. Not fear of enemies. Fear of what he was about to discover. He stepped forward, moving silently toward the darkness beneath the bridge, and what waited for him there was something he could never have prepared for. Salvatore crept closer, pressing his back against the cold concrete pillar, peering into the shadows beneath the overpass. At first, he saw nothing, just darkness and the vague shapes of debris scattered across the ground. The roar of traffic above swallowed all other sounds, creating a strange cocoon of noise that made the space feel even more isolated from the world. Then his eyes adjusted, and his heart stopped. Against the far wall of the underpass, someone had constructed a shelter. Not a tent, not a proper structure, just flattened cardboard boxes arranged into walls. A blue plastic tarp stretched overhead to keep out the rain and snow, and a collection of torn blankets piled in one corner to create something resembling a bed. A home, if you could call it that. And inside that home were 3 children. The oldest was a girl, maybe 7 years old, sitting on an overturned plastic bucket near the entrance. Her hair had been cut short and uneven, choppy in a way that suggested someone had done it with dull scissors and no mirror. On her left arm, stretching from wrist to elbow, was a scar, a burn scar, thick and shiny, the kind that comes from serious injury and heals without proper medical care. She wore no shoes, her bare feet pressed against the frozen ground, the toes red and swollen, some of them tinged with purple. She sat perfectly still, watching the entrance, guarding. Behind her, huddled in the corner, was a boy, younger, maybe 5. He clutched a tattered notebook against his chest like a shield, his small body shaking with each dry, hacking cough that escaped his lungs. Even from this distance, Salvatore could hear the rattle in his breathing. Something was wrong with those lungs, something serious, and in the far corner, inside a styrofoam box lined with crumpled newspaper, lay a baby. An infant, no more than a year old, sleeping beneath a thin layer of covering. Salvatore looked closer at the blanket draped over the baby's tiny body. It was not a blanket, it was the coat, the same old, worn coat that Elena wore every single day. The coat she never took off. The coat everyone in the mansion had noticed, but no one had questioned. At night, that coat did not keep Elena warm. It kept her baby alive. Elena emerged from the shadows behind him, and Salvatore pressed himself deeper against the pillar, holding his breath. She had not seen him. She moved quickly, almost running, crossing the distance between the entrance and the cardboard shelter in seconds. The 3 children turned toward her, and Elena fell to her knees and gathered all of them into her arms. She was crying. Salvatore had never seen her cry before. In 2 years of working in his home, she had never shown anything but that calm, gentle smile. But now, in this place, with her children pressed against her chest, tears streamed down her face, and her shoulders shook with silent sobs. The oldest girl pulled away first. She reached for a plastic bucket filled with murky water and poured some into a cracked cup, offering it to her mother. "Mama, I saved you some bread from this morning. Please eat." Elena shook her head, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. She reached into the plastic bag she had carried from the mansion and pulled out a styrofoam container. Salvatore recognized it immediately. It was the lunch Elena prepared for herself every day in the mansion kitchen. The meal she always said she would eat later. The meal that always disappeared from the counter by the time she left. She had never eaten it, not once. She had been bringing it here. Elena opened the container and began to divide the food. She fed the boy first, spooning rice and vegetables into his mouth while he chewed weakly between coughs. Then the girl, who ate quickly and efficiently, like someone who had learned that food could disappear at any moment. Then the baby, who received tiny portions mashed between Elena's fingers and placed gently on her tongue. Through it all, Elena did not take a single bite. Not one mouthful, not one grain of rice, not one scrap of meat. She fed her children everything and kept nothing for herself. Salvatore leaned against the pillar, his legs suddenly unsteady. The truth crashed into him with the force of a freight train. 2 years. For 2 years, this woman had worked in his home, caring for his daughter, preparing meals she never ate, wearing a coat she gave to her baby every night. She had been starving herself to keep her children alive, collapsing from malnutrition while he signed contracts and counted money, and never once asked her a single question about her life. The doctor's words echoed in his mind. Is this woman living on the streets? Yes, she was, and he had never seen it. Salvatore shifted his weight, trying to see more clearly into the shelter. His foot came down on something that cracked beneath his shoe. A broken bottle, shattered glass scattered across the concrete, and the sound rang out like a gunshot in the enclosed space beneath the overpass. The girl's head snapped up, her eyes, dark and sharp, locked onto the pillar where Salvatore stood. She did not squint. She did not hesitate. She looked directly at him, as if she had known all along that someone was there, and had simply been waiting for them to reveal themselves. In one fluid motion, she rose from the overturned bucket and stepped forward. No fear, no panic, no childish confusion. She moved like someone who had faced threats before, someone who had learned, through hard experience, exactly what to do when danger appeared. She positioned herself between the entrance and her family. Her small body became a barrier, a shield, the first line of defense against whatever was coming. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides, her shoulders squared, her chin lifted. Behind her, the boy with the cough pressed himself deeper into the corner, clutching his notebook like a lifeline. The baby stirred in the styrofoam box but did not wake, and Elena, still kneeling on the cardboard floor, looked up to see what her daughter was staring at. The color drained from her face. Every drop of blood seemed to leave her cheeks at once, leaving her skin the color of ash, the color of snow, the color of someone watching their entire world collapse. Mr. Moretti. Her voice came out broken, barely a whisper. She scrambled to her feet, scooping the baby from the styrofoam box and clutching the infant against her chest. Her whole body trembled. Her legs looked ready to give out beneath her. Please don't fire me. Salvatore stepped out from behind the pillar, into the dim light beneath the overpass. He said nothing. He did not know what to say. He did not know if there were words for this moment. Elena stumbled forward, one hand reaching out as if to stop him, to hold back the inevitable. I know I should have told you. I know I should have said something. But please, Mr. Moretti, this job is all I have. If you take it away, we have nothing. Nothing. Tears spilled down her cheeks, cutting tracks through the dirt on her face. She was begging. This woman who had never asked him for anything, who had worked 12 hours a day without complaint, who had given every scrap of food to her children and kept nothing for herself, was on her knees in the dirt, begging him not to destroy her. Salvatore opened his mouth, though he still did not know what he would say. But before he could speak, the girl moved. She stepped in front of her mother, placing her small body between Elena and Salvatore. She reached back with one hand, pressing against her mother's arm, stopping her. Mama, don't. Her voice was steady, quiet but firm. Don't kneel to anyone. Elena's sobs caught in her throat. She stared at the back of her daughter's head, frozen. The girl turned to face Salvatore. She was 7 years old. She stood barefoot on frozen ground, her toes purple from the cold, her arm marked with a scar that told a story of pain and survival. She wore clothes too thin for the weather and too large for her body. She had not eaten a full meal in months, but she looked at him without flinching. She looked at him the way no one had looked at him in years, not with fear, not with respect, not with the careful deference that people showed when they knew who he was and what he could do. She looked at him with defiance, with challenge, with the absolute certainty of someone who had already lost everything and therefore had nothing left to lose. The wind howled through the underpass, carrying with it the bitter cold of a Chicago winter. And in that wind, the girl's voice rang out clear and sharp. If you're going to make my mother cry, she said, her eyes never leaving his, then you'll have to go through me first. Salvatore did not move. He stood in the cold shadow of the overpass, the wind cutting through his jacket, and stared at the 7-year-old girl who had just challenged him to a fight she could not possibly win. He had faced down gang leaders. He had negotiated with killers. He had walked into rooms where everyone wanted him dead and walked out with their respect. But this child, this barefoot girl with the burn scar and the fierce eyes, made him feel something he had not felt in decades. Shame. Amelia did not wait for him to speak. She stood her ground, fists still clenched, and continued. My mother works 12 hours every day for you. Her voice carried no tremor, no hesitation. Each word came out clear and precise, like she had rehearsed this speech 1,000 times in her head, waiting for the moment she would finally get to deliver it. She gives all her food to us, every single day. She brings home what she was supposed to eat, and she gives it to me and Lucas and Sophia. She doesn't keep anything for herself. Behind her, Elena made a small sound, something between a sob and a gasp. She reached for her daughter's shoulder, trying to pull her back, but Amelia shrugged off the touch and kept talking. She doesn't sleep. I hear her crying every night. When she thinks we're asleep, she sits by the entrance and cries. Then she wipes her face and pretends nothing happened. Salvatore felt his chest tighten. The words hit him like punches, one after another, each one landing harder than the last. Do you know why my mother's money isn't enough for us to live? Amelia asked. The question hung in the air between them. Why? Salvatore heard himself say. 4 months ago, the money she brought home was only 1/3 of what it used to be. Amelia's eyes never left his face. She was watching him, studying his reaction, measuring whether he was someone who could be trusted with the truth. She didn't tell us why, but I heard her talking on the phone to my aunt one night. She said, he threatened to call immigration. He said he would tell the boss that I was stealing. Salvatore's blood went cold. Who? he demanded. Who said that? The old man who wears the black suit, the one with gray hair. He stands by the back door of your house. Mama calls him Victor. The name hit Salvatore like a bullet to the chest. Victor Crane, his head of household staff, the man who had worked for the Moretti family for 20 years. The man Salvatore trusted to manage the mansion, pay the employees, handle the day-to-day operations that a mafia boss had no time for. The man who had been stealing from Elena and threatening her into silence. Salvatore felt the blood rushing to his face, felt his hands curling into fists at his sides. 20 years. He had trusted Victor for 20 years, and this was what that trust had bought him. We have been here for 97 nights, Amelia said. I count. Every night before I sleep, I make a mark on the wall. 97 marks. 97 nights sleeping on cardboard. 97 nights watching my mother give us everything and keep nothing. Salvatore stared at her. At this child who counted the days of her suffering like a prisoner counting the walls of her cell. Amelia tilted her head slightly, studying him. You don't believe me? Before he could answer, she reached into her shirt and pulled out a plastic bag. It was wrapped in multiple layers, folded over itself again and again, sealed against the elements with the kind of care usually reserved for precious documents or irreplaceable photographs. My mother taught me something, Amelia said, holding the bag against her chest. She said the truth always needs proof. Without proof, your truth means nothing. She looked at him with those ancient eyes, eyes that had seen too much and trusted too little. I keep everything in here. Salvatore lowered himself to the ground. The concrete was freezing, the cold seeping immediately through his pants, but he did not care. He sat down slowly, deliberately, until his eyes were level with Amelia's, until he was no longer looking down at her, but meeting her as an equal. The girl watched him with suspicion, her grip tightening on the plastic bag. She had expected him to grab it, to demand it, to take it from her the way powerful people always took things from people like her. But he did not reach for it. He waited. After a long moment, Amelia's shoulders relaxed, just slightly. She unfolded the plastic bag with the careful precision of someone handling something infinitely precious. Layer after layer came apart, revealing the contents inside. 8 pieces of paper. 8 handwritten receipts, each one creased and worn from being folded and unfolded countless times. Each one showing the marks of having been protected, preserved, guarded like treasure. Amelia spread them out on the ground between them, arranging them in order by date. Salvatore looked at the first 4. The handwriting was familiar. The neat, precise script of Victor Crane. Each receipt showed the same amount, $2,500. Each one bore the date, the words monthly salary, and Elena's shaky signature at the bottom. Then he looked at the last 4. $800. $800. $800. $800. The same handwriting, the same format. But the number had changed. The amount had been slashed to less than a third of what it should have been. Salvatore pulled out his phone and photographed each receipt, one by one. The camera flash lit up the dim space beneath the overpass, illuminating the cardboard walls and the sleeping baby and the coughing boy, and the girl who had just handed him the evidence to destroy a man he had trusted for 2 decades. When he finished, he looked at Amelia's arm. The scar ran from her wrist to her elbow, a thick rope of damaged tissue that twisted the skin around it. It was not a fresh wound, but it was not an old one either. The pink edges suggested it had healed within the past year, slowly, imperfectly, without proper medical care. What happened? Salvatore asked quietly. Amelia glanced down at her arm, as if she had forgotten it was there. 6 months ago, Sophia got sick. She had a fever, and she wouldn't stop crying. Mama said we needed warm water to bring down the temperature. She said it simply, without self-pity, without drama, just facts. We found a small gas stove in the garbage. Someone threw it away. I tried to boil water for Sophia. She paused, looking at the scar. The pot fell. The water spilled on my arm. Salvatore felt his jaw clench so tight his teeth ached. No hospital. No medicine. Mama used honey and clean cloth to wrap it. She said honey stops infection. She read it somewhere. Amelia touched the scar lightly, tracing its edge with her finger. It got infected anyway. For 2 weeks, I had a fever. I couldn't move my arm. Mama stayed with me every night, changing the bandages, putting cold cloths on my forehead. She looked up at Salvatore. She asked for 1 day off work to take care of me. Victor said no. He said if she didn't come in, he would fire her. So she came to work, and then he took money from her pay anyway, for missing too many hours the week before. The words hung in the cold air, each one a separate indictment. Salvatore stared at the scar, at the evidence of what this child had endured while he sat in his mansion, drinking coffee, signing papers, living a life so far removed from this reality that it might as well have been on another planet. This was not the scar of an accident. This was the scar of a 7-year-old who had been forced to become an adult before she ever had the chance to be a child. A girl who boiled water for her sick sister because there was no one else to do it. A girl who suffered through an infection without medicine because her mother could not afford to miss a single day of work. A girl who kept receipts in a plastic bag because she had learned, at an age when other children learned to ride bicycles, that the truth without proof was worthless. The coughing started without warning. One moment, Lucas was huddled in the corner clutching his notebook. The next, his small body convulsed with a violent, hacking cough that seemed to tear itself from somewhere deep inside his chest. It was not the dry cough Salvatore had heard earlier. This was something else entirely. Something worse. The boy's face contorted as he struggled to breathe. Each cough came faster than the last, building on top of itself, giving him no time to recover, no time to draw air into his lungs. His hands flew to his throat. His eyes went wide with panic, and then he collapsed onto the cardboard floor, wheezing, gasping, his lips turning a shade of blue that made Salvatore's blood run cold. Elena screamed. She threw herself across the shelter, scooping her son into her arms, pounding on his back with the flat of her palm. But the coughing did not stop. The wheezing did not ease. Lucas's chest heaved as he fought for every breath, each inhale producing a thin, whistling sound that spoke of airways closing, of oxygen running out. Amelia moved. She did not scream. She did not panic. She dropped to her knees beside her brother with a calm that was almost terrifying in its completeness. Her hands found his chest, pressing gently but firmly against his ribcage. Breathe in slowly, Lucas. Follow me. In, out, in, out. Her voice was steady, controlled, the voice of someone who had done this before, many times before. She rubbed circles on his chest with one hand while the other held his shoulder, keeping him upright, keeping his airway as open as possible. Her movements were practiced, efficient, the result of countless nights spent doing exactly this while their mother worked and their baby sister slept. A 7-year-old girl, serving as her brother's nurse. Salvatore pulled out his phone and dialed Dr. Webb's number. The doctor answered on the second ring. I-90 overpass, 47th and Halstead. Now, bring asthma medication. He ended the call before the doctor could ask questions. Elena's head snapped toward him, her eyes wild with terror. No, please, you can't call anyone here. She clutched Lucas tighter, as if she could shield him from the world with her own body. They'll call social services. They'll see how we live. They'll take my children away from me. Please, Mr. Moretti, please don't let them take my children. Her voice broke on the last word. The fear in her eyes was raw, primal. The fear of a mother who had survived 97 nights of hell and was now facing the possibility of losing everything. Salvatore stepped forward. He knelt down in front of her, bringing his face close to hers, forcing her to meet his gaze. Listen to me, he said. His voice was low, firm, leaving no room for doubt. No one is going to take your children. Not tonight. Not ever. I swear it on the honor of the Moretti family. Elena stared at him. Her lips trembled. Tears streamed down her cheeks. But something in his eyes, something in the absolute certainty of his words, made her stop fighting. Lucas's breathing began to slow. Amelia continued her steady rhythm, rubbing his chest, coaching his breaths, guiding him back from the edge. The blue faded from his lips, replaced by a pale pink that was still too light but no longer deadly. Salvatore straightened and shrugged off his jacket. It was Italian leather, custom made, worth more than Elena earned in 2 months, even before Victor started stealing from her. He had owned it for 3 years and never once thought about its value beyond the fact that it fit well and kept him warm. He draped it over Lucas's trembling shoulders. The jacket swallowed the boy whole, the sleeves hanging past his hands, the hem reaching nearly to his knees, but the shivering began to ease. The warmth seeped into his small body, chasing away the cold that had lived in his bones for 97 nights. Elena watched Salvatore wrap his jacket around her son, the jacket of a mafia boss, covering a 5-year-old boy who slept on cardboard under a highway overpass. And for the first time in 97 nights, Elena allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, tonight would be the last. Dr. Webb arrived 17 minutes later, his black sedan pulling up beside the overpass with headlights cutting through the darkness. He did not ask questions about the location. He did not comment on the cardboard shelter or the plastic tarp or the styrofoam box that served as a crib. He simply opened his medical bag and went to work. He listened to Lucas's chest with his stethoscope, his face growing more serious with each breath the boy took. He checked the oxygen levels with a small device clipped to Lucas's finger. He examined the boy's throat, his eyes, his fingernails. When he finished, he stood and faced Salvatore. Chronic asthma, severely undertreated. His lungs are damaged from repeated attacks without proper medication. The doctor's voice was grim. He needs a warm environment and consistent treatment. If he stays out here, his lungs will fail within weeks. Salvatore nodded once. He turned to face Elena and her children, standing in the cold beneath the overpass, surrounded by everything they owned in the world. Pack your things. All of you are coming with me. Elena opened her mouth to protest, but no words came out. She stood frozen, unable to process what she had just heard. Amelia was the first to move. Without a word, she turned and walked back into the cardboard shelter. She gathered the scattered books, stacking them neatly. She folded the torn blankets into squares. She collected the few items of clothing they possessed, smoothing out the wrinkles before placing them into a plastic bag. And then she picked up her mother's old coat, the coat that had covered Sophia for 97 nights, the coat that smelled of exhaust and cardboard and survival. She folded it with the same care she would give a wedding dress, pressing down the creases, tucking in the frayed edges. This coat was not just fabric, it was a promise. It was proof that her mother had given everything, including the warmth from her own body, to keep her children alive. Amelia would not leave it behind. Elena lifted Sophia from the styrofoam box, cradling the sleeping baby against her chest. She took Lucas's hand in hers, and together, the family walked toward Salvatore's SUV. The drive back to Lincoln Park took 40 minutes. 40 minutes of near absolute silence. Lucas sat by the window, his face pressed against the glass, watching the city transform around him. The broken sidewalks gave way to paved streets. The graffiti-covered walls gave way to manicured hedges. The boarded-up storefronts gave way to boutiques with glowing window displays. His eyes grew wider with each passing block, drinking in a world he had never known existed. Sophia slept in her mother's arms, her tiny chest rising and falling peacefully. For the first time in 97 nights, she was warm, truly warm. The heat from the car's vents wrapped around her like a blanket, and she slept deeper than she had slept in months. Elena stared straight ahead, her face unreadable, her body rigid with tension, and Amelia sat with her back perfectly straight, her hands folded over the plastic bag containing the receipts, her eyes fixed on the road in front of them. She did not look out the window. She did not marvel at the mansions or the streetlights or the clean sidewalks. She had seen this world before, through the windows of buses, through the gaps in fences, through the spaces between the lives of the rich and the reality of the poor. She knew this world was not meant for people like her. The SUV turned onto a tree-lined street and stopped in front of the Lincoln Park mansion. Elena climbed out of the car, still holding Sophia. Instinctively, automatically, she turned toward the side of the house, toward the servant's entrance, toward the door she had used every day for 2 years. Salvatore's hand caught her arm. "Not that way." Elena looked at him, confused. "Today," Salvatore said, his voice quiet but firm. "You go through the front door." Elena stood at the threshold of the front door, her feet frozen in place. She had walked past this door 1,000 times. She had polished its brass handles, swept its stone steps, watched guests enter and exit through its carved wooden frame. But she had never crossed it herself. The front door was for residents, for visitors, for people who belonged, not for the help. Her legs trembled as she stepped over the threshold. Her worn shoes made no sound on the marble floor of the entrance hall, and she found herself walking on tiptoe, as if her footsteps might trigger some alarm that would expose her as an intruder. 2 years of entering through the back, 2 years of keeping her head down, staying invisible, knowing her place. She did not know how to walk through the front door. The sound of small feet pounding down the staircase broke the silence. "Daddy, Daddy!" Bella appeared at the top of the stairs, her pajamas rumpled, her hair wild from sleep. She had clearly been waiting, listening for her father's return. She stopped halfway down, her eyes going wide as she spotted the strangers in the entrance hall. "Elena!" she shrieked. "Elena has babies!" She flew down the remaining steps, nearly tripping in her excitement, and skidded to a halt in front of Lucas, staring at him with naked curiosity. "I told you, Daddy. I saw pictures in her wallet. I told you she had babies, but nobody listened." Salvatore placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder. "Yes, you did. You were right." He guided the family through the entrance hall, past the formal living room, into the guest quarters on the first floor, a suite of rooms that had hosted diplomats, business partners, and once, a senator who needed to disappear for a few days. Tonight, it would host a mother and her 3 children. The night housekeeper appeared as if summoned by magic, carrying towels, washcloths, and a stack of clean clothes in various sizes. She asked no questions. She simply set everything down and retreated with a quiet nod. Elena carried Sophia into the bathroom first, then returned for Lucas. The boy stood at the edge of the bathtub, watching his mother turn the faucet, watching the water flow. He reached out one small hand and touched the stream. His eyes went wide. "Mama," he whispered. "Mama, it's warm." He said it like he was witnessing a miracle, like warm water was something that existed only in stories, something he had heard about but never believed was real. Elena's face crumpled. She pulled her son close, hiding her tears in his hair, and helped him into the bath. Sophia screamed when the water touched her skin. She thrashed and kicked and wailed, her tiny body rigid with fear. She had known only cold water, the water from plastic buckets, the water that made her shiver and cry. Warmth was foreign. Warmth was wrong. It took Elena 10 minutes to calm her down, to convince her that the warm water would not hurt her, that she was safe. Amelia did not wait for help. She took a towel and a washcloth and closed the bathroom door behind her. When she emerged 15 minutes later, her skin was scrubbed pink, her short hair damp, but her expression unchanged. She had not let anyone see her undress. She had not let anyone see the scar. The night housekeeper returned with fresh clothes, soft cotton pajamas, warm socks, a fleece pullover. Lucas grabbed them eagerly, marveling at the softness of the fabric. Sophia was already dressed by Elena, wrapped in a onesie, 3 sizes too big that made her look like a tiny, wriggling caterpillar. Amelia looked at the clothes laid out for her. She did not touch them. "I don't need new clothes," she said. "Mine still fit." The night housekeeper glanced at Salvatore, uncertain. Salvatore studied the girl. The way she stood apart from her family, the way her arms crossed over her chest, the way her eyes flickered toward the door, measuring escape routes, calculating risks. She was not refusing out of pride. She was refusing because she did not believe. She had lived too long in a world where nothing came free, where kindness was a trap, where every gift had a price that would be collected later, always later, when you were too deep to escape. Bringing them into the house had been the easy part. Making them believe they belonged here, that they were safe, that no one would hurt them or use them or throw them back onto the street. That would be the real challenge. The mansion fell silent after midnight. Lucas slept in the guest room bed, buried under blankets softer than anything he had ever touched, his breathing steady and clear for the first time in months. The asthma medication Dr. Webb had administered was working, and the warmth of the room was doing what 97 nights under the overpass could not. Sophia slept in a proper crib, borrowed from the attic where it had been stored since Bella outgrew it. She did not stir, did not cry, did not wake every hour shivering. She simply slept, her tiny fists curled against her cheeks. Elena lay on the sofa in the sitting room adjacent to the guest quarters. She had refused to sleep on a bed, insisting it was too much, that the sofa was more than enough. Her body had surrendered to exhaustion within minutes of lying down. The house was at peace, but Salvatore could not sleep. At 2 a.m, he gave up trying. His throat was dry, his mind too loud with everything he had seen and learned. He pulled on a robe and walked downstairs to the kitchen, his bare feet silent on the hardwood floors. He did not turn on the light. The glow from the garden lamps outside provided enough illumination to navigate. And then he saw her. A small figure sat curled on the window seat in the kitchen, knees drawn to her chest, arms wrapped around her legs. She was staring out at the darkness, her eyes wide open, unblinking. "Amelia." Salvatore stopped in the doorway. He did not announce himself. He simply walked to the window seat and sat down on the opposite end, leaving space between them. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Amelia broke the silence first. "I can't sleep on soft beds." Her voice was quiet, matter of fact. "I'm used to the ground." Salvatore said nothing. He waited. "Under the bridge. I had to stay awake at night." She continued, staring out the window as she spoke. "I was the lookout. Mama was too tired. She worked all day. She needed to sleep." Her fingers tightened around her knees. "One time, a drunk man came. He walked right into our space. He was yelling, saying we didn't belong there, saying he would hurt us if we didn't leave." She said it without emotion, without drama, as if she were describing something that happened to someone else. "I picked up a broken bottle from the ground. I held it in front of me. I told him if he came closer, I would cut him." Salvatore felt something twist in his chest. He left. He called me bad words, but he left. Amelia shrugged, a small movement of her shoulders. Mama doesn't know. She was asleep. I didn't want her to worry. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with everything they implied. A 7-year-old girl, standing guard in the darkness with a broken bottle, protecting her family from threats that no child should ever have to face. You're 7 years old, Salvatore said quietly. You shouldn't have had to do any of that. Amelia turned her head slightly, looking at him for the first time since he sat down. I didn't have a choice. There was no self-pity in her voice, no anger, just a simple statement of fact. She turned back to the window, her reflection ghostly in the glass. You're going to send us away, aren't you? The question caught Salvatore off guard. What makes you think that? I can tell you're a powerful person. Her eyes remained fixed on the darkness outside. Powerful people don't keep poor people around for long. We're useful for a little while. Then we become problems. Then we disappear. She drew her knees tighter against her chest. That's how it always works. Salvatore did not answer her question right away. He sat in the darkness of the kitchen, looking out at the same night sky Amelia was watching, and for the first time in many years, he allowed himself to remember. I grew up on the south side, he said finally. Not far from where I found you today, a neighborhood called Bridgeport. Back then, it was no different from back of the yards. Same broken streets, same boarded-up windows, same feeling that the world had forgotten you existed. Amelia did not move, but he could tell she was listening. Her breathing had changed, becoming slower, more deliberate. My father was a drunk. The words came out flat, without emotion. He couldn't hold a job. He spent whatever money we had on whiskey. And when he ran out of whiskey, he took out his anger on my mother. Salvatore paused, the memories rising like ghosts from a grave he had tried to keep sealed. My mother worked 3 jobs to keep me and my brother Dante alive. She cleaned offices at night. She worked at a laundromat during the day. On weekends, she took in sewing from the neighbors. She slept maybe 4 hours a night, and she never complained. Not once. He could still see her face, the exhaustion carved into her features, the way her hands were always red and raw from work, the way she smiled at him and Dante even when there was nothing to smile about. I used to hide food under my bed, he continued. Bread, mostly. Sometimes crackers. Whatever I could take without anyone noticing. I hid it because I was afraid there wouldn't be anything to eat the next day. Because sometimes there wasn't. For the first time, Amelia turned to look at him fully. Her eyes, usually so guarded, held something different now. Something softer. Recognition. I understand you, Salvatore said, meeting her gaze. I was you. I know what it's like to go to sleep hungry. I know what it's like to watch your mother sacrifice everything and still not have enough. I know what it's like to grow up too fast because the world didn't give you any other choice. Amelia studied his face for a long moment, as if searching for evidence of a lie. You're different, she said at last. You got out. Yes, I got out, Salvatore nodded slowly. And so will you. I promise. Amelia shook her head immediately, the motion sharp and certain. I don't believe in promises. Promises break too easily. The words hit Salvatore harder than he expected. 7 years old, and she had already learned that lesson. 7 years old, and she had already built walls high enough to keep out hope. He looked at this child who had counted 97 nights on the wall of a bridge, who had guarded her family with broken bottles, who had kept receipts in a plastic bag because she understood that truth without proof was worthless. Then I won't promise, he said quietly. I'll do, and you'll see. Amelia held his gaze for a long time, her expression unreadable. The seconds stretched out between them, filled with the weight of everything she wanted to believe and everything she had learned not to. Finally, she spoke. You're the second stranger who said he would help my mother. Her voice was flat again, the softness gone as quickly as it had appeared. The first one was my father. He promised he would come back. He promised he would take care of us. She turned back to the window, her reflection staring back at her from the glass. Then he disappeared. We never saw him again. Her small shoulders rose and fell with a breath. I'm not angry at him anymore. I used to be. But now I'm just done. She drew her knees closer to her chest, making herself as small as possible. I don't trust men. Not anymore. Victor Crane arrived at the mansion at precisely 9 o'clock the following morning, the same time he had arrived every day for the past 20 years. His black suit was immaculate, pressed to perfection. His silver hair was combed back neatly. His shoes gleamed with fresh polish. He walked through the service entrance with the confidence of a man who had made himself indispensable, who knew every secret of the household, who believed his position was untouchable. He passed through the kitchen on his way to check the day's schedule and stopped dead in his tracks. 3 children sat at the breakfast table with Bella. Lucas was eating scrambled eggs with the focus of someone who had not seen real food in months. Sophia sat in a high chair, her chubby fingers grabbing at pieces of toast that Elena was cutting into small squares, and Amelia sat straight-backed and silent, watching everything with those sharp, knowing eyes. Victor's face changed. It was subtle, lasting less than a second, but it was there, a flash of recognition, a flicker of fear, the brief, involuntary reaction of a man who sees his carefully constructed world beginning to crack. Then the mask returned, smooth and professional as always. "Mr. Moretti," Victor said, turning toward Salvatore, who had just entered the kitchen. "May I ask who these children are?" Salvatore did not answer. He simply looked at Victor for a long moment, his expression unreadable, then turned and walked toward his office. He did not look back. He did not need to. He knew Victor would follow. The office door closed behind them with a soft click. Victor stood in front of the desk, his hands clasped behind his back, the picture of composed professionalism. But his eyes darted briefly to the items arranged on the desk's surface, and this time, he could not hide his reaction. 8 receipts, spread out in a row, printed photographs of each one, bank statements, highlighted with yellow marker. Salvatore sat down in his leather chair and steepled his fingers, regarding Victor the way he might regard an insect he had found crawling across his dinner plate. 8 months, Salvatore said. His voice was calm, quiet, terrifyingly controlled. $1,700 each month. $13,600 total. Victor's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. That's how much you stole from a woman with 3 children. A woman who worked 12 hours a day in this house. A woman who gave every scrap of food to her children and starved herself to keep them alive. Victor opened his mouth to speak, but Salvatore raised one hand, cutting him off. "I know what you did. I have the receipts. I have your handwriting. I have Elena's signature. I have the bank records showing exactly how much I paid you to give her, and exactly how much you actually gave." He leaned forward slightly. "What I want to know is why." Victor's composure cracked, just slightly. Sweat began to beat at his temples. "Mr. Moretti, I can explain. The woman, she's not trustworthy. These immigrants, they lie. They exaggerate. She probably what?" Salvatore's voice dropped to a register that made Victor take an involuntary step backward. "She probably deserved to watch her children sleep in a styrofoam box under a highway overpass. She probably deserved to have her son nearly die from untreated asthma. She probably deserved to collapse from starvation on my kitchen floor." Victor's face had gone pale. The confident mask had crumbled completely, revealing the coward underneath. Salvatore stood slowly, rising to his full height. "I trusted you for 20 years. 20 years. I trusted you with my home, my daughter, my employees. I trusted you like a brother." He walked around the desk, each step deliberate, each step bringing him closer to the trembling man before him. "And this is what you did with that trust. You stole from the most vulnerable person in this house. You threatened her with deportation, even though her papers are legal. You told her you would accuse her of theft if she spoke up." Victor's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. "And while you pocketed her money, while you bought yourself nice dinners and new clothes and whatever else you spent it on, 3 children were sleeping on cardboard. A 14-month-old baby was using a coat as a blanket because her mother had nothing else to give." Salvatore stopped directly in front of Victor, close enough to see the sweat rolling down his face. "You have 2 choices." He reached over to the desk and opened the top drawer. Inside, resting on a bed of velvet, was a black handgun. Victor's eyes went wide. "Choice 1. You write a check for every cent you stole. You sign a confession. You leave Chicago tonight, and you pray I don't change my mind about letting you live." Salvatore's hand rested on the edge of the drawer. "Choice 2. He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. Victor's hands trembled as he wrote the check. The pen scratched against the paper, each stroke a confession, each number an admission of guilt. $13,600, the amount he had stolen, penny by penny, from a woman who had nothing. He signed his name at the bottom, the signature shaky and uneven. Nothing like the confident flourish he had used for 20 years on household documents. Salvatore watched in silence, his arms crossed, his face carved from stone. Next came the confession, a single page, handwritten, detailing everything Victor had done. The reduced payments, the threats of deportation, the accusations of theft he had held over Elena's head like a knife. Every word was dictated by Salvatore, and Victor wrote each one without protest, his resistance completely shattered. When the pen finally stopped moving, Victor looked up with the desperate eyes of a man hoping for mercy. He found none. "There's one more thing," Salvatore said. Victor swallowed hard. "What else could you possibly want? You're going to kneel." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. "Kneel?" Victor's voice cracked. "Kneel? Before who?" Salvatore did not answer. Instead, he looked toward the office door. It opened slowly. Amelia stood in the doorway, her small frame silhouetted against the light from the hallway. She held the plastic bag in her hands, the same bag she had protected for 97 nights, the bag containing every receipt, every piece of evidence that had brought this moment into existence. She stepped into the office without hesitation. "Before her," Salvatore said, "before the 7-year-old girl who kept the proof of your crimes while she slept on cardboard under a bridge, before the child who protected her family when you were stealing from them." Victor stared at Amelia. His face cycled through disbelief, then shame, then something that might have been fear. Amelia stared back. She did not blink. She did not flinch. She simply looked at him with those eyes that had seen too much, that had learned too young how cruel the world could be. "Kneel," Salvatore repeated. Victor's legs buckled. He sank to his knees slowly, the movement awkward and graceless, the descent of a man who had never knelt before anyone in his life. His expensive suit creased against the hardwood floor. His silver hair fell forward, hiding his face. He could not look at her. He stared at the floor, at his own polished shoes, at anything except the child standing before him. Amelia walked forward until she was directly in front of him. She said nothing. For a long moment, she simply looked down at the man who had caused her family so much suffering, the man who had taken money that should have fed her brother, the man who had threatened her mother into silence, the man who had forced them onto the streets. Then, slowly, deliberately, she nodded once. A single nod, an acknowledgement that justice had been served. Not forgiveness, not absolution, but acceptance that this chapter was closed. She turned and walked out of the office without a word. Salvatore gestured to Dante, who had been waiting in the hallway. His brother entered the office with 2 of their men, and together they escorted Victor out of the mansion, out of Lincoln Park, out of Chicago. He would never be allowed to return. The front door closed behind him with a sound of finality. In the hallway, Elena stood with her hand pressed over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. She had heard everything. She had watched through the crack in the door as the man who had tormented her for months knelt before her daughter. Amelia walked up to her mother and took her hand. "You were right, Mama." Her voice was clear and strong, echoing off the marble floors and high ceilings of the mansion. "The truth needs proof, and proof always wins." 2 weeks passed, and the mansion began to feel different, not in any physical way. The rooms were the same, the furniture unchanged, the routines of daily life continuing as they always had. But there was something new in the air now, something that had not been there before. Life. Lucas slept through the night for the first time in 2 years. The asthma medication Dr. Webb prescribed worked steadily, clearing his lungs, easing his breathing, silencing the terrible rattle that had accompanied every breath he took under the overpass. He woke each morning without coughing, without gasping, without the fear that this breath might be his last. Sophia found her voice. For months, she had been silent, barely making sounds beyond soft cries and whimpers. Elena had worried something was wrong with her development. But it turned out that Sophia had simply learned, in her 14 months of life, that noise attracted danger. Noise brought strangers. Noise was not safe. Now, in the warmth and security of the mansion, she began to babble. Simple sounds at first, then syllables, then something that might have been Mama. Elena cried the first time she heard it. Elena herself was changing. Her cheeks had filled out slightly, the sharp angles of starvation beginning to soften. She ate at the table now, with everyone else, not standing in the kitchen picking at scraps. She still worked, because she insisted. But Salvatore had reduced her hours and increased her pay to what it always should have been. She smiled more often, and sometimes the smile reached her eyes. Bella and Lucas became inseparable. The 4-year-old girl and the 5-year-old boy spent their days together, inventing games, sharing toys, learning from each other. Lucas taught Bella how to draw, his small hands guiding her crayon across paper to create shapes she had never imagined. Bella taught Lucas how to play chess, a game her father had shown her, and she was patient with him when he forgot how the knights moved. They laughed together, they played together, they healed together, in the way that children do, quickly and completely, leaving the scars behind like outgrown clothes. But Amelia did not heal. She kept her distance from everyone, including Bella. When Bella asked her to play, Amelia politely declined. When toys were offered, She did not touch them. When the other children ran through the halls shrieking with joy, she watched from the corner with eyes that remained guarded, alert, waiting for something bad to happen. She still sat by the window every night, staring into the darkness, keeping watch over a family that no longer needed watching. She still refused to wear shoes in the house, her bare feet padding silently across the floors, as if she might need to run at any moment. And she still did not trust. One night, Salvatore woke at 3 a.m. and went downstairs for water. The kitchen light was off, but the refrigerator door was open, casting a pale glow across the floor. Amelia stood in front of it, a plastic bag in her hands. She was taking food, bread, cheese, apples, anything she could fit. She was stuffing them into the bag quickly, quietly, with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this many times before. She was hoarding, preparing, making sure that if everything fell apart again, she would have something to survive on. She heard his footsteps and froze, her body going rigid with fear. Caught. Salvatore did not raise his voice. He did not scold her. He did not ask what she was doing, because he already knew. He walked to the refrigerator, opened it wider, and began pulling out more food. He added it to her bag, item by item, crackers, juice boxes, a container of leftover pasta. "Take as much as you want," he said quietly. Amelia stared at him, her expression unreadable. But one day, Salvatore continued, closing the refrigerator, "You won't need to do this anymore." 1 month after the night under the overpass, Salvatore invited Amelia into his office. She came reluctantly, her bare feet silent on the hardwood floor, her eyes scanning the room for threats out of habit. She sat in the leather chair across from his desk, her posture rigid, her hands folded in her lap. Between them, on the desk, sat an object that made Amelia's breath catch in her throat, the styrofoam box, the same box where Sophia had slept for 97 nights, the same box lined with crumpled newspaper, stained with dirt and age and survival. Salvatore had kept it, cleaned it carefully, preserved it like a relic. "Why do you have that?" Amelia asked. Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed her. She remembered that box. She remembered tucking her baby sister into it every night, arranging the newspaper to keep out the cold, draping their mother's coat over the top like a blanket. "So I don't forget," Salvatore said simply. Amelia looked at him, waiting for more. "I kept it to remind myself of what I failed to see. For 2 years, your mother worked in my house, and I never once asked how she lived. I never once looked closely enough to notice she was dying right in front of me." He touched the edge of the box with his fingertips. "This box is my reminder. Every time I see it, I remember that I almost let a baby die because I was too blind to pay attention." Amelia was quiet for a long moment, staring at the box. When she finally spoke, her voice was smaller than usual, younger, closer to the voice of the child she should have been. "I used to think we would live under that bridge forever." Salvatore did not interrupt. "I used to think that was all we deserved. That we were poor, and poor people didn't get to live any other way. That the world had decided we weren't worth anything, and there was nothing we could do about it." She looked up at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I thought I would grow up under that overpass. I thought Lucas would too, if he lived long enough. I thought Sophia would never know anything else." "You were wrong," Salvatore said gently. "I know that now." Amelia's voice wavered. "But back then, I didn't. Back then, I just tried to keep everyone alive one more day. That was all I could do. And you did it." Salvatore leaned forward slightly. "You kept your family alive. You protected your brother. You cared for your sister. You saved the receipts that brought Victor to justice. You did all of that at 7 years old." Amelia shook her head. "I just did what I had to do." "That," Salvatore said, "is exactly what a hero does." For the first time since he had known her, Amelia smiled. It was small, fragile, barely more than a slight curve of her lips, but it was real. It reached her eyes, just for a moment, lighting them with something that might have been hope. Salvatore reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a box. He set it on the desk and pushed it toward her. Amelia opened it slowly. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a pair of shoes. Red canvas sneakers with white laces, brand new, exactly her size. The first shoes she would own in 2 years. Amelia stared at them. Her hands trembled as she lifted one from the box, feeling the weight of it, the newness, the promise it represented. And then the tears came. Not loud sobs, not dramatic crying, just silent tears sliding down her cheeks, one after another, falling onto the red canvas like raindrops. She was not crying because the shoes were beautiful. She was crying because, for the first time in her life, Someone had looked at her bare, frostbitten feet and decided to do something about it. 6 months later, on a crisp spring morning, Salvatore drove Elena and her children to a quiet street in Pilsen. The neighborhood had changed since Elena had last passed through on those desperate bus rides home. New businesses had opened. Families walked along the sidewalks. Children played in small yards bordered by chain-link fences. It was still modest, still working class, but it was alive with the kind of hope that comes from community. Salvatore stopped the car in front of a small house at the end of the block. It was nothing fancy. A simple single-story home with white siding and a small front yard where a young tree had been planted. A narrow driveway led to a tiny garage. The windows were clean, the roof was new, and the front door had been painted a bright, cheerful blue. Elena stared at it through the car window, not understanding. "What are we doing here?" Salvatore handed her a set of keys. "This is yours." Elena's face went pale. She looked at the keys in her hand, then at the house, then back at Salvatore. No, I can't accept this. It's too much. It's not a gift," Salvatore interrupted gently. "It's compensation for what Victor stole from you and for what I failed to see." He looked at the blue door, then back at Elena. "I let you suffer for 2 years because I didn't pay attention. I let your children sleep under a bridge because I never bothered to ask a single question about your life. This house doesn't erase that. Nothing can. But it's a start." Elena's hands trembled around the keys. Tears spilled down her cheeks. In the back seat, Lucas pressed his face against the window, his eyes wide with wonder. Sophia bounced in her car seat, babbling happily at the sight of the tree in the yard, and Amelia sat quietly, her red sneakers bright against the floor mat, watching her mother's face. They moved in that weekend. Elena continued working at the Moretti mansion, but everything was different now. She worked 8 hours a day instead of 12. She had a proper contract, health insurance, paid vacation. She was no longer invisible, no longer disposable, no longer a ghost who existed only to serve. Lucas started school in the fall. He made friends quickly, his gentle nature and artistic talent drawing other children to him. His asthma was under control now, managed by medication and regular doctor visits. He slept through every night without coughing, without gasping, without fear. Sophia grew stronger every day. She ran through the small backyard on sturdy legs, laughing at butterflies, chasing the neighbor's cat, filling the house with the sounds of a happy child. She spoke in full sentences now, her vocabulary expanding daily, making up for all the months of frightened silence. Bella came to visit every weekend. She and Lucas remained inseparable, their friendship deepening into something that resembled family. She taught him to play piano on the small keyboard Elena had bought secondhand. He taught her to paint with watercolors. They were siblings in every way that mattered, and Amelia thrived. She enrolled in school 2 months after they moved in, and immediately rose to the top of her class. Her teachers marveled at her focus, her discipline, her hunger for knowledge. She was still serious, still mature beyond her years, but she had learned to smile. Sometimes, when Lucas made a joke, or Sophia did something silly, she even laughed. And every day, without exception, she wore her red sneakers. The feet that had once been bare and frostbitten, purple with cold, cracked and bleeding on frozen ground, were now protected, warm, safe. One evening, Elena found Amelia sitting on her bed, the old plastic bag in her hands. The bag with the receipts, the bag she had guarded for 97 nights under the overpass. "You can throw that away now, Mija," Elena said softly. "It's over. We don't need it anymore." Amelia shook her head slowly. "No, Mama." She held the bag against her chest, the same way she had held it all those nights in the cold and the dark. "I'm keeping it, to remember, so I never forget where we came from." 1 year later, in the office where empires had been built and enemies had been destroyed, Salvatore Moretti kept a special drawer. It was not locked. It held no weapons, no contracts, no secrets of the criminal underworld. It held something far more valuable. Inside that drawer sat a styrofoam box, the same box where Sophia had slept for 97 nights, the same box that had been a crib when there was no crib, a bed when there was no bed, a symbol of everything a mother had sacrificed to keep her children alive. Salvatore had cleaned it carefully, preserved every crease and stain, kept it exactly as it had been on the night he found it under the overpass. And on the lid, he had taped a photograph. 4 children sat on the front steps of a house with a blue door. Amelia on the left, her red sneakers bright against the concrete, a small smile on her face. Lucas beside her, his arm around Bella's shoulders, both of them laughing at something outside the frame. And Sophia in the middle, 2 years old now, her chubby hands reaching toward the camera, her face split by a grin of pure joy. Beneath the photograph, in Salvatore's own handwriting, were the words, "So I never forget what I failed to see." Every Sunday, without exception, Salvatore and Bella drove to the house with the blue door. They came for dinner. Elena cooked for everyone now, real meals, generous portions, food that filled the table, and filled the belly, and filled the heart. She no longer saved her plate for others. She no longer went hungry so her children could eat. She sat at the head of her own table, in her own home, and she ate with her family, all of them, together. The 4 children had grown into something more than friends. They were siblings in every way that mattered. Bella and Lucas finished each other's sentences. Sophia followed Amelia everywhere, copying her walk, mimicking her expressions, worshipping her older sister with the devotion only a toddler could muster. They fought sometimes, as children do, but they always forgave. They always came back together. They were family. And in the corner of Elena's bedroom, folded neatly on a shelf, sat the old coat. The coat that had kept Sophia warm for 97 nights. The coat that Elena had worn every day in the mansion, not for herself, but so she could bring it home to her children. The coat that smelled of exhaust fumes and cardboard and love. No one wore it anymore. The children had proper blankets now, proper beds, proper warmth, but Elena could not throw it away. Every winter night, when the Chicago wind howled outside and the temperature dropped below freezing, Elena would take the coat from the shelf. She would unfold it carefully, smoothing out the wrinkles with her palms, and she would lay it at the foot of Sophia's bed, just as she had done under the overpass. Not because Sophia needed it, but because Elena needed to remember how far they had come, to remember what they had survived, to remember that even in the darkest moments, when all seemed lost, there had been hope, there had been strength, there had been love, and there had been Amelia. Amelia, who still kept the plastic bag of receipts in her dresser drawer. Amelia, who still wore her red sneakers every single day. Amelia, who had learned to laugh and play and be a child, but who never forgot the 97 nights when she had been a soldier. She would look at that old coat sometimes, late at night, when the house was quiet and everyone else was asleep, and she would remember. Not because she wanted to suffer, not because she wanted to live in the past, but because she wanted to remember how strong she had been, how brave she had been, how she had stood barefoot in the freezing cold and looked a mafia boss in the eye and refused to back down. She wanted to remember that she was worth more than the world had told her she was. She wanted to remember that she deserved a better life, and now she had one. There are lessons in this story that go beyond words. The truth needs proof. A 7-year-old girl understood this better than most adults ever will. She kept her receipts. She protected her evidence. And when the moment came, she had the power to demand justice. Dignity does not depend on circumstance. Elena had nothing. She lived under a bridge, slept on cardboard, starved herself to feed her children, and yet she never lost her dignity. She kept her children clean. She kept them educated. She kept them loved. Poverty could take everything from her except who she was. The invisible people have stories too. They have families. They have dreams. They have value. Sometimes, all it takes is one person willing to look, really look, to change everything. And sometimes, the hero is not the powerful man with money and influence. Sometimes, the hero is a 7-year-old girl with a plastic bag full of receipts and the courage to say what no adult dared to speak. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more stories like this one to life. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Share it with someone who might be struggling. Share it with someone who needs to remember that even in the darkest times, there is hope. And please, leave us a comment. We want to hear from you. Have you ever failed to see someone who was suffering right beside you? Have you ever been the invisible one, hoping someone would notice? What does this story mean to you? Share your thoughts, share your feelings, share your heart. We read every comment, and your words inspire us to keep telling these stories. Thank you for watching until the very end. Thank you for caring. Thank you for being part of this community. We wish you good health, happiness, and peace in your daily life. May you always have eyes to see those who need to be seen. May you always have the courage to speak the truth. And may you always remember that even the smallest act of kindness can change someone's entire world. Goodbye for now. We will see you in the next story.